Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. I want to start off the podcast right from the very get-go today by disclosing my dog in a fight over the subject that we're going to tackle today. And that is that the Joe Kent resignation that came down yesterday does not surprise me. And it does not surprise me because of the fact that I know a little bit about Joe Kent and I know about his character. I don't think too highly of Joe Kent's character. I have not thought very highly for a while now. And the reason for that is because I was a campaign manager for a time for the lady, Heidi St. John, who ran against him, or he against her, for a congressional seat in the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C., the Washington 3rd District. Now, I know I've seen Joe Kent in action. I've talked with him personally. I know a little bit about him, and I am not very high on his morality, let's just say his character in general. And I wasn't real happy even with the local Republican Party, even though I am a PCO in our area, which means a political committee officer, which is basically the first contact that someone in the Republican Party would have with the party. And I cover a certain area. I'm an elected official. And even though I have a say in the local party and what it does and says and things like that, I have not been very happy with them because of Joe Kent. The last two election cycles have, basically promoted Joe Kent and made it impossible for almost anyone else to run against him. They have taken away the primary process, basically. They have neutered it. And so no one can run against him in the primaries as long as they choose their candidate. Nobody else can run against them. That they're the only ones that are going to come out of the primary process are the ones that they choose. And in this case, they chose Joe Kent both times. And both times he lost. He lost to Perez Blusenkamp, which is a Democrat, very weak candidate. But he lost anyway, both times. And I'm in a purple area of a blue state, so it was definitely before him there was a Republican in there, and a very moderate Republican who did some not so good things, including voting for the impeachment of Donald Trump in his first term. But Joe Kent was not the answer in my estimation. And so what happened today, or actually not today, what happened yesterday, Tuesday, is that Joe Kent, he resigned from his position that he is in right now, and as the U.S. National Counterterrorism Director, and he didn't just resign. And so let's get into that. In fact, I'm going to read a post from Heidi St. John, the one that I was working to get elected. And this is what she has to say. She says, President Trump's director of the U.S. National Counterterrorism Center, Joe Kent, has resigned in protest over the war in Iran. I ran against Joe for Congress in 2022, and I tried to warn Republican voters that Joe was no true conservative. His ties to Nick Fuentes, his vote for Bernie Sanders, and his voting history alone demonstrated that he would not have represented Republicans in Congress well. During our race, Joe was offered repeated airtime on Tucker Carlson's show, When I tried to get equal coverage, I was denied even one interview. Things are looking clearer by the minute. I expect an interview with Tucker will be the next thing we see from Joe. And by the way, it does sound like he is scheduled for next week, according to some sources. The anti-Israel roots run deep with those two. When I lost the primary to Joe, I backed him in an effort to unite Republicans and keep the seat from being lost to a Democrat. This is a true betrayal of those who worked hard to put Joe in a position of influence and authority. Trump honored Joe by putting him in charge of protecting us from terrorism. In return, Joe took issue with a no boots on the ground, 2-week offensive that is wiping out the most effective terror regime in the last 50 years. My phone is ringing off the hook with calls and texts from people who knew Joe, who knew who Joe was. I only wish Trump could have seen it. Joe's decision to backstab the president and denounce Trump as someone who can be bought by a foreign country is shocking and embarrassing. President Trump and Washington state Republicans made Joe. Trump's endorsement raised him to national prominence. When he failed to win the Washington state, Trump gave Joe a position in his administration. Good riddance, Joe. Don't move back to Washington state. We've got enough trouble with Democrats and leftists here as it is. So, yes, he resigned, but he didn't just resign. And in fact, I am going to read you his full statement here in a minute. But I also, I want you to listen as I read this to you. I want you to listen to the fact that he's not just resigning here. I want you to listen to what he's saying, and I want you to ask yourself, do you believe this? So he says, Mr. Trump, this is Joe Kent's resignation letter. President Trump, after much reflection, I have decided to resign from my position as director of the National Counterterrorism Center effective today. I cannot, in good conscience, support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. I'm going to repeat that sentence again, because I think this is key. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. He goes on to say, I support the values and the foreign policies that your campaign that you campaigned on in 2016, 2020, 2024, which you enacted in your first term. Until June of 2025, you understood that the wars in the Middle East were a trap that robbed America of the precious lives of our patriots and depleted the wealth and prosperity of our nation. In your first administration, you understood better than any modern president how to decisively apply military power without getting us drawn into never-ending wars. You demonstrated this by killing Qasem Soleimani and by defeating ISIS. It says, early in this administration, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your American First platform and sowed pro-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran. This echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States, and that should you strike now, there was a clear path to a swift victory. This was a lie, and is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women. We cannot make this mistake again, he says. As a veteran who deployed to combat 11 times and is a Gold Star husband who lost my beloved wife, Shannon, to a war manufactured by Israel, I cannot support sending the next generation off to fight and die in a war that serves no benefit to the American people, nor justifies the cost of American lives. I pray, he says, that you will reflect upon what we are doing in Iran and who we are doing it for. The time for bold action is now. You can reverse course and chart a new path for our nation, or you can allow us to slip further towards decline and chaos. You hold the cards. It was an honor to serve in your administration and to serve to serve our great nation. Joseph Kent, Director, National Counterterrorism Center. So that is the letter, word for word, of what he wrote in resigning. Now, the Daily Wire comes out with this article about it, and they said that a top intelligence official is stepping down over opposition to strikes on Iran, claiming the United States was pressured into the war by Israel and its powerful American lobby. Joe Kent, the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, announced he was leaving his position because President Trump was waging war against Iran at behest of Israel. He said he cannot, in good conscience, support the ongoing war in Iran. Quote, and this is part of what I just read to you. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. Now, former Trump officials immediately responded to Kent, a military veteran. Is Kent? He was given an administration post after losing a congressional election, actually 2 congressional elections, believe it or not, labeling him a crazed egomaniac is what they're calling him. Quote, Joe Kent is a crazed egomaniac who was often at the center of national security leaks, while rarely, never, producing any actual work, is what Taylor Bunowich, the former deputy White House chief of staff, said. He spent all of his time working to subvert the chain of command and undermine the president of the United States. Another quote says that this isn't some principled resignation. He just wanted to make a splash before getting canned. What a loser. Yeah. I think this is part of the key here to what has been happening. They say that this isn't some principled resignation. He just wanted to make a splash before getting canned. Now, the reason that they're saying this is because he was a part of the briefings, the security briefings that the president gets. He was a part of those up until just recently, up until a few months ago. He stopped being a part of those. Why? Well, it looks like because he was the one that was leaking a lot of information from those meetings. And so now that he's not a part of it, so he wasn't a part of what was going on before we, went into Iran with the strikes on Iran. And because he was a part of the leaking. So it looks like, they started looking into him. He wasn't really doing much work. I mean, we've had 3 terror strikes here in the U.S. In the last 2 weeks. The Trump administration has clearly laid out its decision-making process, revealing the Iranian statements during negotiations that led it to the strikes. 2 weeks ago, Trump's top negotiator, Steve Witkoff, laid out the sheer proximity of Iran to a nuclear breakout, a reality the Iranians bragged about during the talks. They bragged that they were almost ready to have a nuclear weapon. Witkoff outlined what he described as Iran's breakout capacity. According to Witkoff, Iran currently possesses roughly 10,000 kilograms of enriched material, including approximately 460 kilograms enriched to 60% purity. and another 1,000 kilograms at 20%. He argued that the 60% stockpile could be further enriched to weapons grade level within days. Witkoff said Iranian negotiators said to us directly, with no shame, that they controlled 460 kilograms, enriched to 60%, and they were aware that such material could theoretically be converted into enough weapon-grade uranium for as many as 11 nuclear bombs. Quote, they were proud of it, he said. They were proud that they had evaded all sorts of oversight protocols to get to a place where they could deliver 11 nuclear bombs. Dan Bonagino, the former deputy director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, also released an apparent response to Kent's claims, though it did not directly name him, said, quote, the Iranian theocracy was an immediate threat, is what Bonagino said. He says they were committed to our destruction, and anyone telling you otherwise is misleading you, unquote. On social media, a Gold Star wife who says her husband was killed by an Iranian strike responded forcefully to Kent's claims, saying, and this I found powerful, quote, Gold Star wife here, my husband didn't die for Israel, said Cheryl Ann, who says her husband was killed by an Iranian strike in 2007. Quote, we didn't suddenly stumble into this because of Israel. Our service members have been in the crosshairs of Iranian-backed terror networks for years. That's the reality families like mine have lived with. So spare me the talking points that this is Israel's war. Some of us have already paid for it in American blood. Well, Kent's resignation should not be surprising, as he has long been on record in opposition to military action against Iran. In 2024, appearing with Tucker Carlson, he predicted that the Iranian people would rally around the regime and made clear that he thought striking Iran would be a disaster when he said, quote, if we start taking strikes inside of Iran itself, that is exactly what the Iranian regime wants, Kent said. They will benefit from that. If we start attacking Iran the way that we attack Iraq, the way we attacked Afghanistan, then the Iranian government, the Iranian mullahs, the Ayatollah, the people will rally around them in support, unquote. He also said, we can't just let the Iranians attack and kill our people, but at the same time, we know if we go to war with Iran, this is going to be a disaster. Well, asked what the long-term effects of a war with Iran would be on the United States, he answered immediately, it would be very bloody. I have no doubt that we could probably defeat some of their air defenses and go in there and have another shock and awe campaign. But again, like we saw how the shock and awe campaign in Iraq really didn't actually work in the long run. If we start conducting strikes in Iran, everyone in Iran will rally around their leader. This will make them even more revolutionary. And then we will have Iranian proxies throughout the entire region that will be conducting attacks. Well, Kent has been closely tied to Trump's director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, previously serving as her chief of staff. Gabbard is set to testify to the Senate tomorrow. So, yeah, I mean, there's been signs that he was thinking along these lines, but there's also he's gone contrary to even things that he's said in the past as well. I thought this was interesting from the Daily Caller. It says President Trump responded Tuesday to a question about former director of National Counterterrorism Center, Joe Kent's resignation over the Iran conflict. And it said Kent stated in his resignation letter that he would not support the war in Iran because the nation posed no immediate threat to the United States. While taking questions in the Oval Office, Trump scoffed at Kent's statement and defended his administration's decision to begin the ongoing conflict. He said, Director of National Counterterrorism Joe Kent, he just resigned today. He said he can't support your conflict with Iran. What's your reaction to that? The Daily Caller White House correspondent Reagan Reese asked. And this is what he said. He said, well, I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security. I, I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy, Trump said. But when I read his statement, I realize it's a good thing that he's out because he said that Iran was not a threat. Iran was a threat. Every country realized that what a threat Iran was. The question was whether or not they wanted to do something. Kemp never denied that Iran was a threat to the U.S. or any other country and clarified in a statement that Iran posed no immediate threats. But the administration has maintained that Iran intended to advance its ballistic missile program and its nuclear capabilities. Trump, alongside Secretary of State Marco Rubio and other officials, have yet to clarify how Iran posed an immediate threat to the U.S. is what the caller is putting out there. But obviously, if they're this close to 11 nuclear bombs, they would have no qualms about using those nuclear bombs. No qualms at all. So yeah, it's definitely one of those things that that it's like a head scratcher type of moment here to many that didn't know who Joe Kent was. Kent was a veteran of the Iraqi War who retired from the U.S. Special Forces. He did lose his wife, Navy cryptologist Sharon Kent, in a suicide bomb attack in Mamji, Syria in 2019. He alleged in the resignation letter that his wife died in a manufactured war with Israel, but that's basically that's how she passed. I thought it was interesting. We just heard from Trump. I thought it was interesting. Mike Johnson and what he had to say as well. He took issue with Joe Kent, and this is what he had to say.
Well, that proposition at the end is clearly wrong. I'm on the Gang of Eight. I got all the briefings. We all understood there was clearly an imminent threat, that Iran was very close to the enrichment of nuclear capability, and they were building missiles at a pace that no one in the region could keep up with. They were far outpacing our allies and friends and us in our defense capability, because we had personnel, installations, members of the armed services, and civilians in the region. Iran was building up ballistic missiles at such a rapid pace, and we knew that their plan was to fire them upon Americans. The commander-in-chief and his administration had a very difficult decision to make. I don't know where Joe Kent is getting his information, but he wasn't in those briefings, clearly, because the Secretary of State, the Secretary of War, and everyone, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kane, they had exquisite intelligence, and we understood that this was a serious moment for us. Had the president waited, I am personally convinced that we would have mass casualties of Americans, service members and others, and our installations would have been dramatically damaged. And so the president felt that he had to strike first to prevent those mass casualties. That's a summary. I can't tell you the classified part, but that's a summary that's made public, and it's accurate. Yeah.
So that is Johnson right there, and that's what he's saying. He's saying, I don't know where Joe Kent's getting his information from, but man, he is not in the loop. In fact, Lars Larson, he had an opinion piece I found interesting, because Lars actually has been a big backer of Joe Kent, and this is what he had to say. He says, "Boy, has former Green Beret Joe Kent turned into a gigantic disappointment. In the last 60 minutes, I learned that Kent has resigned from his job as head of America's National Counterterrorism Center. The reason Kent gives in his opposition to President Trump's military strike against Iran. I supported Kent's 2 unsuccessful runs for Congress, losing to Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. He would have been my member of Congress in Washington 3rd Congressional District, so I voted for him twice. When he got the job heading up counterterrorism, I figured he was a perfect fit. Now, considering what Joe Kent just posted on social media is in his resignation letter to President Trump, Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. Excuse me? Iran has been planet Earth's biggest state sponsor of terrorism for 50 years. They've pursued nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. They've funded terrorists like Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthis that have killed Americans. Even if they never got the technology to deliver a nuke to the U.S., any nuclear-armed Iran would threaten to set off an exchange that would bring in the whole world. Not only that, but Joe Kent decided to resign right after 3 Islam and Iran related domestic terrorists attacked on American soil in Texas, Michigan, and at Old Dominion University. And he's resigned the counterterrorism role even as the Democratic Party continues its jihad against funding Homeland Security. Come to think of it, maybe we're better off without Joe in that job. So Laura Loomer, I thought, actually went even farther. She said, here is your post, and she's talking to obviously Joe Kent at this point. Here is your post from 2024 in which you said Iran has been trying to kill President Trump since 2020. Today, in your resignation letter, you said Iran poses no threat to the United States. Did Netanyahu hold a gun to your head when you tweeted this in September of 2024? And what he did, she said, today you said Israel controls the Trump administration and convinced Trump Iran was a threat. But here you are in your own words saying Iran is a threat. So here's what he posted. He posted, Iran has been after Trump since January of 2020 after he ordered the targeted killing of terrorist Qasem Soleimani. This isn't a new threat. The Secret Service consistently failed to secure Trump is new. We need to figure out exactly why these failures keep happening. That's what he posted. She says, you yourself admitted Iran is a threat after they tried to assassinate President Trump. Why are you now lying and saying Iran isn't a threat and blaming the war on Israel? You're full of poop, Joe. We're keeping it family friendly. Here's another post, in fact, if you're not convinced of that. Here's a post from September 1st of 2024. In response to Israeli-American hostage Hirsch Goldenberg Polin being killed, okay? And he posted this. He says, Biden-Harris funded Iran. Iran directed October 7th. Biden-Harris continued to fund Iran while American hostages are murdered. Under Trump, Iran was contained and we had historic peace in the region. Under Biden-Harris, we are sucked back into another disastrous war in the Middle East. And again, not convinced? All right, here's another post from Joe Kent. Iran is poised to attack. Biden and the D.C. war machine has given them plenty of options to harm us by leaving our troops deployed in small bases in Iraq, Syria, and Jordan. Biden also gave Iran the funding for its proxies to attack us in Israel. The solution isn't billions more in foreign aid and adding more U.S. troops to the region. It's cutting off Iran's access to funding, depriving them of targets, leveraging Qatar to hand over Hamas's leadership to get hostages returned. So he hasn't always thought this way. So what happened to Joe Kent? Again, I maintain he's not a person of very high character. Okay, easily swayed, doesn't stand on any kind of morals of his own, and I'm gonna leave you with this. This is from his new wife's bio. He's been remarried since 2023. His new wife, Heather Kaiser, in her bio, it says this: since the 2020 riots, she has returned to to research and analysis of current events for organizations such as American Contingency and Gray Zone. So Joe Kent's new wife, Heather Kaiser, works for the pro-Tehran Gray Zone and for Max Blumenthal, who, of course, shills for Tehran, Hezbollah, and all kinds of writings for Al-Manar. Gray Zone is, if you don't know what Gray Zone is, the Gray Zone is best described as a far left fringe investigative news outlet with strong anti-imperialist leanings, known for one-sided reporting that often defends authoritarian regimes opposed to the U.S. The Gray Zone routinely criticizes Western and Israeli media coverage of Iran as biased or regime change propaganda, and presents Iran in a more favorable light than mainstream Western outlets do, which is really hard to do, to be honest with you. They pose themselves as a news outlet. They really aren't. They are known for mixed factual reporting, consistently conspiracy type theory promotions, ideological biases, all kinds of stuff. The Gray Zone is widely characterized as this fringe outlet that is strongly critical of the U.S. And Israeli policy, sympathetic to Iran and anybody opposed to the U.S. Coverage by outlets like the Washington Post and others have noted financial links between at least one senior Gray Zone editor and Iran state media, raising concerns about foreign influence on its content. And that particular person is their founder and editor, Max Blumenthal. We'll talk about him in just a second. Media bias evaluators and academic NGO observers often group Gray Zone with sites that promote pro-Russia, pro-Iran narratives and disinformation, especially on foreign policy and conflicts in the Middle East. In fact, if you go to their website right now, one of the current lead stories on its website is entitled this: How Israel and the FBI Manipulated Assassination Plots to Goad Trump into Iran War. That's the lead. So I told you that the founder and editor, Max Blumenthal, has definitely some financial ties to Iran and things. And this he has aligned himself with kind of the socialist left views, but frequently draws accusations of echoing pro-Russian, pro-Chinese, pro-Iranian propaganda as well. Well, this is who Kent's new wife, is associated with. She's doing research and things for. So suddenly, when you start to look at it that way, you can see that someone who was already doesn't have very good character, is easily swayed, is all this kind of stuff, and doesn't have very good moral standing, marries somebody who is very pro-Iran. Wow. I mean, you can start to see things come together, and then all of a sudden he resigns his position here, and then backstabs Trump. Well, it starts to look a little clearer when you place those things together. So I would love to hear what you think on it. Of course, you can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. Thank you very much for listening.
This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.